Let me start with our topic, Introduction to Dataproc. Next slide, please. This is the agenda for today. We'll be explaining about what is Dataproc, how to set up a Dataproc cluster, functioning of Dataproc, and different use cases associated with Dataproc. And finally, we'll have demo sessions. So let me start by giving a brief introduction to Dataproc. Dataproc can be thought of as a managed version of Hadoop and Spark. This means we can create a Hadoop cluster and deploy jobs on it and delete the cluster once we are done with it. It is similar to AWS EMR and Azure's HD Insight. Mostly, people will have questions like we can run these data processing framework on VM instances or compute engine instances itself. So why do we need Dataproc? What Dataproc does is it actually uses compute engine instances under the hood, but it takes care of the management details for us. It's a layer on top that makes it easy to spin clusters up and down as we need. And every machine on the cluster by default will include a Hadoop, Spark, Hive, and Pip. And for people who find it difficult to set up and configure a big Hadoop cluster, the no-ops nature of Dataproc will be a big attraction because it allows us to on and off clusters as we need them. And due to this functionality, we'll be using cloud storage rather than the HDFS storage that we'll be using in Hadoop, because we all know HDFS is like inherently server driven. There we will have a name node and data node, and the coordination between a name node and data node will be essential for running any kind of MapReduce job. And so that wouldn't be a great model in GCP because your building is based on the utilization of VM instances, and therefore we'll be going for Google storage, Google Cloud Storage rather than HDFS. So more generally, Dataproc will be a great option for organizations which are now planning to move to the cloud because it allows us to move our existing Hadoop ecosystem to cloud very seamlessly. And moving on to why Dataproc, here we'll be discussing about different benefits of Dataproc. When compared to traditional and on-premise products and other GCP services, Dataproc is having so many advantages like low cost. It is priced at only 1 cent per virtual CPU on top of other cloud instances we use. And it charges only for what we really use with second by second billing and a low 1 minute minimum billing period. So moving on to super fast. Without Dataproc, it will take about 30 minutes to create Hadoop and Spark cluster. But with Dataproc, we can create and shut down cluster within just 90 seconds. And it also has built-in integration with other GCP services such as BigQuery, Cloud Storage, Bigtable, Cloud Login, Monitoring, etc. And also, we don't need the assistance of any administrator or special software for managing Spark and Hadoop clusters. And also we can easily interact with these clusters and the Hadoop jobs through GCP console or Cloud SDK or also using Dataproc REST API. And when we are done with the cluster, we can simply turn it off so that we don't waste any money on the idle clusters. And also it is very simple and familiar to use because we don't need to learn any new tools or APIs for using Dataproc. So moving on to setting up a Dataproc cluster. Here, setting up a Dataproc cluster will involve like a number of choices related to VM instances, which will be residing inside that cluster. So by default, every cluster will have like one master and two worker nodes. Google also provides us with using single node cluster, which will have only one node and itself will act as a master node and also as a worker node. We can also use preemptible instances, which are very cheap compute engine resources because they can be pulled away with a 30 seconds notice, that is basically at any point. And also they'll be forced to terminate if they have been running a job for like 24 hours. So they can be used for processing, but not for storage. And also it is not possible to have a preemptible only cluster. Even if we attempt to do this, what Dataproc will do is it will automatically add two non-preemptible worker nodes. And another biggest attraction of Dataproc is the ease with which can scale the clusters. In fact, it is also possible to scale a cluster even when the jobs are actually running. Like we can add workers, remove workers, add storage, etc. And Dataproc also provides us with high availability configuration where we can create clusters with 3 master nodes rather than one. And Dataproc will automatically set them for failover, and it will do so by adding them to Apache Zookeeper's configuration. And another feature of interest is automatically restarting jobs. By default, jobs on Dataproc will not restart on failure. Restartable jobs will be particularly helpful for like long running and streaming job, and also to mitigate some common types of job failure like out of memory issues, unexpected VM reboots, etc. And finally, about the connectors, the BigQuery connector is nothing but a library that enables Spark and Hadoop application to read data from BigQuery and also write data to BigQuery. Basically, we'll be having two BigQuery connectors. One is Spark BigQuery connector, which adds a Spark data source and allows data frames to interact directly with BigQuery tables. And another one is Hadoop BigQuery connector, which uses Hadoop mappers and reusers to interact with BigQuery table using input format and output format classes. And moving on to Bigtable connector, Bigtable supports Apache Edge-based APIs, and therefore it will be a great option for any Spark or Hadoop job that uses Apache Edge-based. We can use Bigtable in the place of Apache Edge-based. And moving on to the cloud storage connector, which will be by default installed on all Dataproc cluster nodes. And it offers like number of benefits like direct data access, HDFS compatibility, data accessibility, high availability, etc. And in cloud storage, data will be globally replicated without the loss of any performance. And move on to PubSub Lite connector, which allows us to use PubSub Lite as an input source to Apache Spark. And other than this, we also have some features like cluster schedule deletion, which will allows us to avoid some incurring GCP charges for an inactive cluster. Here we can configure to delete a cluster after a specified cluster idle period or at a specified future times, etc. We also have some data features like Dataproc Enhanced Flexibility Mode, which allows us to minimize job progress delay in case if you remove any of the nodes while running a cluster. And also another data feature is Dataproc on Google Kubernetes Engine, which will allow us to run Spark jobs to a running Kubernetes Engine cluster using a Dataproc Jobs API. We'll see more on this in upcoming slides. Over to Anuja.
Thanks, Megha. Yes. So previously we saw what is the Dataproc and the benefits of Dataproc and how to set up a Dataproc cluster. So now coming to the architecture of Dataproc, that is how it works. Now we all know that Dataproc is a managed Apache and Apache Hadoop and Spark service. But the other main thing is that it integrates with other GCP services as well. It separates storage and compute. So it will reduce the burden of compute having all the storage details. That is, it will reduce the effort. We can have all the data and storage separately and transfer only the amount of data required for compute of a Dataproc. Now, first from the external application, that is either from Spark or Hadoop or Edgebase, we receive the application logs, and then we send the data to either cloud storage or BigQuery or Bigtable. Cloud storage, it's a highly available object storage service. It allows storage and retrieval of any amount of data at any time. Now, when we take BigQuery, it is mostly used for SQL-based tables. It is a fully managed data warehouse which stores data sets at even petabyte scale. It can analyze data at terabytes of data very quickly. And Bigtable, it's a NoSQL wide column database that's used for heavy read and write purposes and at a very low latency. Now, so the data is stored at either the we mentioned data sources, and now moving to the production, and that is moving to the Dataproc. Now in Dataproc, in test development, we can understand how much of data we have to do ETL, that is extract, transform, and load, and we can decide how much of node should be applied to a cluster, and we can dynamically assign them. We can pay for only what we're using. We have to pay only for what we're using. We don't have to pay for extra services, and we can specifically build clusters for that exact build purpose. Like we can build a specific cluster to just run HBase. We can build a specific cluster and a job to run either PySpark or Spark or Hadoop, such services. And these can be used for batch processing, querying, machine learning, streaming, and all those. Now at the end, after all this is done, again the data that is the analytical result is stored back into cloud storage or the other two services. Now, on top of this, if we take Dataproc has native integration to Stackdriver monitoring and cloud logging. Now, to see what are these two, Stackdriver monitoring, it's a tool that is used to monitor the performance and health of clusters. We can find the metrics, that is the CPU utilization or how much log bytes were used. All those data can be seen in Stackdriver monitoring. We can use them even to analyze and create dashboards or charts. We can even create uptime checks, wherein it will tell us if the maximum, if it crosses a specific threshold. This will be seen in the last section. And now coming to cloud logging, it allows us to store and analyze all the logging data and events, that is system activity logs and data access logs, what all has been done previously, and all the logs will be stored in cloud logging. And now, lastly, coming to analysis, that is Data Lab. Cloud Data Lab, it's a interactive data analysis and machine learning environment. So here it becomes easy to take things like Jupyter Lab or Presto. We can take and point it out to the Dataproc clusters, and we can use for machine learning purposes. So this is the basic structure how Dataproc works. Now, coming to all the latest features provided by Dataproc. So first, as we all know, Jupyter is a Python lab environment. Now, looking at the Dataproc features that are available in Dataproc. Now, there's a feature called auto scaling, which was explained previously by Medha, wherein the cluster will simply grow to its size. It needs to process the full data set and will reduce the size when it's not required. So it will save us time, so that we don't have to move to a larger server environment, or we don't have to figure where to migrate and reduce time. So this is one of the features that is available in Dataproc. Now we can integrate the Dataproc auto scaling along with notebooks, the Cloud Lab notebooks, specific AI platform notebooks like Jupyter, you mentioned, and Presto. Such notebooks can be used. And there's a tool called as Cloud Scheduler. Okay, as the name suggests, it's a scheduling tool based on time. We can automate after what time do you want to rerun a job or to retrain an ML model. So this is also one of the features. And one of the main things from Spark and Hadoop is they are pre-processing tools wherein you also have the GPU attached. Now Dataproc also provides the way to it attach GPU to the clusters, so that it will save the time to find out what are the underlying cluster resources. And schedule deletion, as previously said, we can specify an ideal period wherein after a particular time that it has to be deleted. Suppose on a weekend is just to go, you can specify a time after that when the cluster finishes running, it will automatically delete, so that it will save you cost and time. Now, this is one feature. Now coming to Delta Lake. Delta Lake is another application. It's an open source storage layer, which stores data lakes. And now coming to what is Data Lake. Data Lake is a centralized repository that has all structured and unstructured data. So this is what is Delta Lake. Now the Delta Lake can be integrated with cloud storage in Dataproc. Now the benefits of Data Lake is it provides ACID transaction. ACID is A stands for atomicity, C for consistency, I for isolation, and D for durability. So as it suggests, each transaction, that's a group of operations, acts as a single unit, and it provides consistent results and acts in isolation from other operations, and it makes sure that this durability is stored, as the name suggests. So, and one more extra feature provided by Delta Lake is it'll include time travel. Time travel is data versioning. That is, it can go behind and see what all operations were performed before. It will have the full audit trials. It will enable rollback. it also provides schema enforcement. That is, it will automatically tell us the schema variation. That is one of the features. Now, this Delta Lake, when it's integrated with cloud storage, there are few required specifications. That is, there should be atomic visibility of files. Whatever that's happening should be visible, and only one writer must be there when this is, only one writer should have access to this when it's happening. And there should be consistent listing. That is, everything must be written in a directory. So these are the listings the data lake has. But one main feature that Datapro provides is it can have even multiple writers, which is a major benefit. Now, this is what the data lake provides. Along with data lake, there's even Apache Iceberg. It is a similar table format like SQL. Even that is supported by Dataproc. Now, coming to the last feature, that is, it has GKE enabled with Dataproc, as mentioned before. So GKE along with Dataproc, it's a unified resource management, and it will improve, it will make the Dataproc be faster, and will upgrade it, and will have a resilient infrastructure. That is, we don't have to worry about sizing and building clusters and how to manipulate Docker files or how to go around with Kubernetes. So these are the main advantages provided by Dataproc. Now, coming to access control. When a Dataproc project is enabled, there must be so many users who wants to use it. Now, the project manager who holds it should not necessarily give all the functions to everyone, right? Because there can be data loss, there can be breach of data. So there is roles given separately. Viewer role is as in just view access to cluster, job, and operation. They can see what all is happening. And editor role is they can edit clusters, jobs, and operations. Now, owner role is all these combined together, and they can decide who should have what access and what user role. Now, worker role is separate because it's assigned only to service accounts. Now, coming to what is a service account. A service account is a special type of Google account that is used to represent a non-human user to use other Google API services, Google Cloud services. Now, worker is the specific only kind of role assigned to service account. Now, after this, Srivatsan will continue. He'll explain.
Thanks, Munija. So far we have gotten a quick overview of we saw what is Dataproc, why you are using Dataproc, and what are the new features in the Dataproc and stuff like that. Now I'll walk you guys through the various use cases in which Dataproc is being used, and one industrial application in which Dataproc is used, and which will be followed by 3 demo sessions. So let's get started. So the two major use cases of Dataproc are the first one is moving our Hadoop and Spark clusters to the cloud. So enterprises are migrating their existing on-premises Apache, Hadoop, and Spark clusters over to Dataproc. So if you look at it, there are 2 major reasons for this to happen. The first one is managing cost. So in Dataproc, in Google Cloud overall, we know that the building is quite detailed. We can manage the cost, we can manage the building for every single second, for every single KB MB of data that we consume, for every instance that we spin up. So stuff like that, it is very easy to monitor the cost, to predict the cost, to set the limits, stuff like that. So since it is being very user friendly, they try to move every clusters from their Hadoop and Spark environment to Google Cloud. So the second one is unlocking the power of elastic scalability. So the main use of Dataproc is scalability. We can scale the resources to from KB to GB to TB to any kind of data that we need. So we'll deeply look into the scaling part in the future slide. So with Dataproc, enterprises get a fully managed, purpose-built cluster that can auto-scale to support any kind of data and any kind of analytic processing job. So this is the main first use case of Dataproc. So moving on, we have a second use case, which is called as data science on Dataproc. So this pretty much deals with the creation of No, we can customize our own ideal data science environment by spinning up various clusters. And after spinning up the clusters, we can integrate various open source softwares like Apache Spark, Jupyter Notebooks, and NVIDIA Rapids and stuff like that. We can integrate those open source softwares with the Google Cloud AI services and various GPUs to assist in accelerating our machine learning and AI development. So these are the two main use cases of Dataproc. Next slide. So this is an industrial application of Dataproc. So some 3 to 4 years back, Telco System signed. Ecosystem is a telecommunication company based on Manhattan. So they signed agreement with Google to enable the services of Dataproc into their industry. So how is Dataproc is being used in the ecosystem is what we're going to do for. So the application is of threefold. So the first one is Lambda architecture, the second one is algorithmical modeling, and the third one is probabilistic approach. Instead of getting deeply into the application, so I'll just give a quick overview of what these concepts generally mean. So Lambda architecture, generally in every sourcing of data, the processing is consists of two steps. The first one is stream processing, and the next one is batch processing. Stream processing is more of real-time processing. Like when we get data from a source, we process it immediately, by time to time. So from the source to the receiver, it is processed simultaneously for every data we receive. So in batch processing, what we do is we process in volumes. Like we don't process for every single data. It's like we set a limit for 10 or 20 MB or 200, so stuff like that. And when we get a chunk of data, we process them immediately, and we wait for another chunk of data and we process. So this is Lambda architecture. And moving on to ergodical modeling. So there's a concept called as ergodicity. So in mathematics, ergodicity expresses us the idea that in any point in a moving system, either a dynamic system or a stochastic process, any point will eventually visit all parts of the space that the system moves in. So if you consider any point of a system in, what happens is that it will eventually visit all parts of the space, either in uniform or randomness. So either in a uniform pattern or in a random pattern, every point in a system will move to each and every corners of the system. So this is called as ergodicity. And moving on, it is called as a probabilistic approach. So from the graph, you can see that probabilistic, yeah, for example, if we toss a coin, say the head or tail, so the various event and chances of it occurring. So these three concepts. So now we'll look how these three concepts are being applied by Dataproc in data telecom systems. So in telco system, so assuming you're using a mobile phone, so when you use a phone, you enter various rooms, you enter various streets, in different areas, you can observe that the reception of data will be, varying. In one point, you might receive high speed data. In another point, you'll go, there will be minimum amount of data. And when you keenly observe that, there won't be huge distance from where you are. Like even within 1 or 2 meters, the reception of data might vary. So telco system had this issue, and Dataproc found a way found a solution so that this can be rectified. So what is that? Dataproc has a stack driver monitoring, like Kamsa said. This is a logging. So what Dataproc is that it logs the data of the mobile phone. Like the network receivability. It records for every single second. For example, if you take at 9 a.m., it will create a log of 9 a.m. This amount of data is received from this place. On 1 a.m., this amount of data is received from this place. So like that, it creates a log for each and every second, each and every minute. So generally, a mobile data network is a dynamic system. It can be modeled ergodically. So that's what I was saying about ergodical modeling. This means that network performance in any radio network performance in geometrical shapes should be observed and modeled over a period of time. So rather than just observing the data, it should be modeled over a period of time. So for even if you take for 30 minutes, there will be huge amount of data for that to for storing. Storing this sort of data requires a huge geospatial data store and a huge time series data store. So this huge amount of data is stored as a nested map. this is where the ability of Dataproc comes in. The ability of Dataproc, it gives a probabilistic approach to test the system. So Dataproc, how it's applying is that it processes the data even from it processes the data in both stream and batch processing, and after processing, it makes sure of the algorithmic modeling, and after that, it uses its probabilistic approach to create a self-healing mobile network. So based upon the data it receives, it shows that it will it will give insights like what to say. So in this area, this in this places we can improve the reception of data. Like that, it will give it will enable the administrator to get a better overview of where the problem is like. So this is how it happens based on the ecosystem. So next slide. So I'll walk you guys through a demo test being planned. So scaling a cluster. So this is the main, I was talking about scaling a cluster. So in this, we are going to, yeah. Mm, so we are going to generally estimating value of pi. So in mathematical, we estimate the value of pi like dividing the circumference by the diameter. Like it's 3.14. So we are going to create a program and run it in Dataproc and show you guys how to estimate the value of pi and show the effect of the powerful effect of Dataproc to reduce the time to scale a cluster, stuff like that. So yeah, next slide. So usually we're enabling the Dataproc API, and after this we have to get into the dashboard of Dataproc. So the first step is creation of cluster. So we are just giving a name to the cluster, set its location, zone, and the cluster type. We are selecting a standard cluster which provides a single master node and two worker nodes, and we are changing the machine type. Since we used a trial account, we had this quota limit, right? So in this quota limit, we were just allowed for a single core and 3.75 GB of memory. So you can choose whatever you want if you have a paid account. So in the trial account, we were restricted to this. So we are customizing both the master nodes and the worker nodes to the limit that was restricted. So after setting this up, it will take some time to create the cluster. You skip that part, and it will take for at least 40 to 50 seconds. So the cluster is now up and running. You can see the region, zone, and number of worker nodes that are being used. So the job. So the job is really where the we import the the codes that are required to calculate the value of pi. So the first step is to create a job, and a job name we give, select the region, and the cluster one is the cluster that we selected right now, and this is a Spark job. There are various jobs like PySpark, and we had these files from GitHub. So in the end we'll leave the link to for you guys for reference. So yeah, the jar file is the main class file. It was all from taken from GitHub. So arguments. So the arguments, what it really means is that generally we calculate the value of pi. As like I said, mathematically we calculate by dividing circumference by the diameter. But in this, how we do is that we take a square, and inside a square we draw a circle. And what this 100,000 means is that 100,000 random points will be pointed inside the circle that we generate. So since the unit circle x square plus y square is equal to 1, so whenever the value of x and y is less than 1, we can confirm that those points are inside the circle. So like that, when the whole circle was covered, we can get the entire circumference, and from this we calculate the value of pi. So this argument generally means a number of points that we use to calculate the value of pi. So that's it. Submit and take some time to run. So here we can see the start time and the elapsed time. So you can see that the job was completed in 3 minutes and 23 seconds. And we can also see the region, which cluster, which job type, and in the end we can get the job output. You can see here the value of pi is roughly 3.14 and yeah, this completes the first step of our process. Yeah, so our next aim is to reduce the elapsed time. So that's where scaling the cluster comes in. So what we do is we create another cluster, standard cluster. The same, we customize the master node, we customize the worker node, and but yeah, so this is where we add the cluster. So what's the catch here is that in order to add extra secondary worker cluster, the minimum number of worker nodes should be at least 2. Here I entered 1, so it mentions that number of nodes must be 2 or more. So that means that in order to spin up a preemptible secondary node, sorry, we have to have a minimum of 2 worker nodes. So secondary worker nodes. So that's why preemptible. So the reason why we use preemptible is that I think Mehta already mentioned it, but let me edit it again. So it has a 24 hours life cycle, and it does not used for storage. So for any process that can be fault tolerant, like a minimum amount of fault or failure is okay. So in that cases, you can. So the main reason is the first one is easy spin up. So like Mehta said, 20 to 30 seconds all it takes to spin up a preemptible node, and it has a small life cycle, and it does not store any kind of data. It's faster, so that's why we use preemptible here. So preemptibility, we have selected preemptible, and we get a cluster. Now we have to run the same job in this cluster rather than the old cluster. So now we can see here the total worker nodes is 3. So that the two ones are the initial worker nodes, and the third one is the new preemptible node that we added. So we can clone the same job instead of doing it again. There's an option called clone. So when we clone here, we can get a copy of the same job, and here we select the new cluster and the job type Spark. The rest can be set the same. And now when we run it, yeah, so you can see here the elapsed time, it's 2 minutes and 26 seconds. Previously it was 3 minutes and 36 seconds, and now it is 2 minutes and 26 seconds. So we can easily see the reason behind this. So the main reason behind this is the addition of an extra secondary preemptible node. So like this, we can even spin up like 2, 3, 4, any number of nodes you want, but that may inclusive excessive charges. Since it's a demo, since it's a trial account we are using, this is the one we can do at best. But I have personally worked it, and I can assure you guys that the elapsed time can easily come to in seconds, like 15-20 seconds it can be made to run. Yeah. So yeah. Mm. So we can see the value of pi here. The same output is exactly everything is the same. So this brings us the into the first demo, and the next demo Nida will take care of. Thanks.
As demo, we saw how we can scale a cluster to reduce the processing time. Now we'll be seeing how we can connect BigQuery with Dataproc. So here we are using Spark BigQuery connector to read data from BigQuery and also write data to BigQuery. So what we are doing is we are initially reading data from BigQuery sample data set into a Spark data frame in Dataproc to perform a word count program. And after performing all the operation, what the connector will do is, it will initially buffer all the data into a cloud storage temporary table, and then it will copy all the results to the BigQuery in one go. And after that, the connector will attempt to delete the temporary files after it has loaded it into the BigQuery. In case if this job fails, we have to manually delete those files in the cloud storage temporary table. So we will see this with a demo. So yeah. So what we are doing is, we are initially creating a word count data set where a final results will be stored using the pqmk command. And after that, we'll be creating a temporary storage bucket named temp data proc bucket for storing the results temporarily before copying it to the BigQuery. So now we are moving on to the data proc dashboard for creating the cluster. The process will be similar to the one we discussed in the last demo. So here we are creating a standard cluster with one master and two worker nodes. And we are using a basic N1 standard 2 configuration because of the free trial limit. You can also go for higher configuration for better performance. So one thing we can notice after creating this cluster is that Dataproc will automatically create two other storage bucket along with this cluster. So we can see that from the home page of GCP. So here we can see that we'll be having additional staging bucket and temporary bucket. Staging bucket be used to store some cluster job dependencies, job driver output, and cluster configuration files. And temp bucket will be used to store some ephemeral cluster and jobs data like map reduce history files, Spark history files, etc. So now what we are going to do is, we are going to directly SSH into the cluster master node. You can also submit a job as discussed in the previous demo. This is just another way of doing it. So here we'll be creating a word count program. Yeah, and here you can see we are initially creating a Spark session object using the Spark session.builder function. And then we are using the bucket that we created for temporarily storing the results before copying it to the BigQuery. So we'll be specifying the name here. And here we are loading the data from BigQuery sample data set using the read.format function. And then we'll be performing the word count program. Here the Spark SQL will be used to run SQL queries programmatically and return the result as a data frame. And finally, we'll be writing it to the BigQuery data set as mentioned earlier, word count data set, which is shown here, and the results will be stored in the word count output table. So yeah, we'll be then storing this Python document. Yeah, now we'll be running this program by specifying the BigQuery Spark connector jar file in jars flag. Let me forward it in a few seconds. So yeah, this is the output we got, like the maximum number of times a word have appeared in that data set. You can also visualize this as a table in the BigQuery. So for that, we'll be opening the BigQuery dashboard. So there, under the data set that we created earlier, we can see our results. So this is the data set we created, and the word count output is the table name we specified in that program. Here in the preview tab, we can see the table. which will be similar to the output that we got in our program. And from here, we can perform the required analytics as we wish. So in the next slide, we'll discuss about how we can connect Stackdriver monitoring to Dataproc. Anuja? Yeah.
Yeah, Stackdriver monitoring. As mentioned previously, Stackdriver monitoring is used to monitor the performance and health of Dataproc clusters. Here we can build a dashboard to analyze all the metrics and the performance, or we can even create a monitoring alert, which will let us know if it crosses or if it crosses a specified threshold. Now for this, there's already a recorded demo, but we prefer a live demo for a better understanding for the time constraint. So here in Dataproc, a cluster is created and kept. Now to monitor it. Yes, to monitor. This is monitoring. This is Stackdriver monitoring. Okay, here now dashboards. If we go to dashboards, there are already available dashboards. We can create a custom dashboard. Just a create dashboard, and we can give any name. Okay, a sample name. Sample dashboard. And there are different charts that are available: line, stacked area, stacked bar, heat map. We can select the chart that we require, and we can select what resource type do we want. Either we want to select the VM instance or the cloud Dataproc cluster, and we can select the metric that we require, which metric we want to analyze. Suppose I want to analyze HTTP capacity. I give that. And since there's only one cluster, it's one line visible. Now, suppose the same thing if I see in a VM instance and I check CPU utilization, there's a cluster with one master node and two worker nodes. So there are three different colors visible. Now, when you keep here and see, the blue is master and the pink and green is worker nodes. Now we can add a filter, like specifically, if I want to check only one either master or worker, I can mention. Now suppose I want to analyze only master, I can analyze the master and I can add the filter. Now only the master would be visible. The performance of only the master node, the CPU utilization master node is visible. We can check either mean or max, min or max, whatever is required. Okay, now we can add similarly, we can add either stack bar or scorecard, stacked area, whichever is required. Now the same, when I perform the same thing in scorecard, the percentage is seen. Okay, and in the scorecard, we can you can see the nearby. It's a spark line, right? You can change it to either spark line or spark bar or an icon, however you want to change it. Okay, and these charts can be pushed aside, and it can be cloned. It can be like how we work in a data visualization tool can be done over here. Like for example, take Tableau or Power BI. So once this is done, it can be switched to view mode so that only the charts is visible. So this is how you have to create a custom dashboard. Now this is one of the examples. Now coming to alerting. Okay, alerting is it's a timely awareness. It will alert if it crosses specific threshold. Now we create a alerting policy. This is describe the circumstances under which you want to be alerted. Okay. Now I give add condition. I can select. Now I am selecting the VM instance. Now the same. Now let's take CPU usage utilization. Now suppose and in the filter let me the VM instance. Right? So and aggregator, we can add whether we want mean or sum or max. Now let me take mean. Okay. Now we can know if it's any or number, how much. Let me take any time series with violates if it's above a specific threshold. Let's look at all the thresholds over here. It is 0.028, 0.026. Suppose let me give 0.027. Okay. Or 0.03. So if it 0.027, there's a red line mark. So that is a threshold. If it crosses that, and let's check for the most recent value of 1 minute, whichever we want to select. If it crosses, let's add. So it will notify us if it crosses a specific threshold. Now it will notify us, but where should it be notified? We have to enter for that. We can select whether we want notified by email or PubSub is a messaging service through that, or SMS we can select. So already we had selected email and added an email account. We can here give me add new, and we can select the email address and display name. So we had added one and kept. So we had selected this. So this notification channel is selected. So, point is done. And here, the notification channel for practice purpose is selected. And then this is the alert, okay? And alert cross threshold. Kindly choose the threshold. So this is the option. You can add any other information that you want to give. When you save it, it's saved, and when it crosses, you will be alerted through the email. So this is how a Stackdriver monitoring. This is an example of how it works. We created an alert and a dashboard. Now this is the live demo. So next is done. Now it's open for asking questions. Anyone has questions?
So if you guys have any kind of doubts regarding this, please feel free to ask. So in the meantime, I'll put a form in the chat. So it's just a feedback form, and so you guys can fill the form once the details. So any kind of doubt, just want to clear up.
And even when the cluster is shut down, we will still be having access to the data as we are using cloud storage rather than HDFS. Since, as I already mentioned, in that staging bucket and temporary bucket will still be available even if the cluster is off, so we can access the data from there. So, there is any more question? If no, please fill the form and we can drop off. Thank you so much for attending our webinar.
Yeah, thanks and sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, sorry for the delay.
Thanks for bearing with us for
Yeah.
the past one. I hope you guys learned something new, and this is even the first time for us. So any kind of positive or criticizing or negative feedback, any kind of feedbacks are welcomed. And yeah, thank you guys.
Any doubts, you can let me
Thanks.
Feel free to ping us, regarding this if you have regarding Dataproc or any Google Cloud products, any kind of doubts, we'll try to clear as much as we can. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Yes.